This is Barry McKnight, the voice of the Troy Trojans. You're tuned in to the Phillip Jordan Show podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Phillip Jordan Podcast. I am Phillip Jordan, in studio host and producer of North Football on 96.9 The Legend. Also, cover the Auburn Tigers with the Auburn Wire, part of USA Today. And we have a jam-packed show for you today on the show. Going to be joined by Jay Stevens from Locked On Buckeyes in just a little bit. And we go over 40 minutes talking all things Ohio State, beating Michigan, snapping that streak first time since 2019. We will talk about the upcoming game, the Big Ten Championship game against Indiana, number 1 versus number 2. We will talk about the impact that could have on the college football playoff rankings and some other stuff as well. And also, we talk about, get Jay's thoughts on the SEC coaching carousel, which I'm going to talk about here on the Open. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I very easily probably just could go in here and recap rivalry weekend, but I think that is not what people are talking about. They're talking about the coaching changes going on within the SEC. So we will discuss all that and much, much more on this edition of the Phillip Jordan Podcast. You can check out the Phillip Jordan Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review, and I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you leave just 4 stars, you're just a straight-up hater. You can also check out the show over on YouTube at the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. Please hit the subscribe button and bell for all notifications. Please leave a comment on a video, and I'll read it on a future edition as well. You can follow me on social media at PJordanSports, and you can email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. All right, so let's do some talking some SEC coaching carousel stuff. As we knew, as during the season has gone on, all the coaches in the SEC getting fired. I mean, first it was Sam Pittman at Arkansas, then Billy Napier at Florida, Brian Kelly at LSU. Then you see Hugh Freeze at Auburn, and then just Sunday night, Mark Stoops at Kentucky, and all these positions are now been filled. And especially when the LSU job came open, you're kind of wondering who was going to be the guy there. And then Florida opened. And then right when Florida opened, it just felt like Lane Kiffin was the top guy for that job. We thought, okay, for sure, Lane is going to Florida. He's talked about how he's like Spurrier, Florida, the visor, all that. It seemed like a great fit. But then LSU, that became a thing. And it really seemed like, okay, it was a competition between LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida to get Lane Kiffin. And then as we saw last week, later as the week went on, as we get through Thanksgiving, it looked like the Florida Lane Kiffin thing, that was just not going to happen. That went away. So then Florida points their direction to Jon Sumrall, who had been linked for a while to Auburn and also to Ole Miss if Lane did leave, which of course he did. But that was also there. And you got to remember, Jon Sumrall did coach as an assistant there at Ole Miss at one point before he was at Kentucky. And then he went on to Troy, and then what he did at Tulane, now he's at Florida. And then you had to wonder, okay, what's Auburn going to do if Jon Sumrall doesn't work out with that deal? And DJ Durkin was a possibility there too as well, just because the job and how the players have responded to him. And then what's going to go on with Arkansas? You kind of felt like Kentucky, Mark Stoops had just felt like that program had kind of hit that wall, like they had finally just fallen apart. He had a good run there at Kentucky, but it finally just hit that point where changing happened. But the whole storyline and with the coaches, and look, like I said, I'm not going to go over rivalry weekend. That might be something I would have done in the past, but just with this alone, this is the big story. I mean, look, we saw it happen. Ole Miss won the Egg Bowl. Georgia won against Georgia Tech. And now, I will say this. As I say, I'm getting into rivalry weekend a little bit. You never know when I'm going to just kind of like go off course here on the show. Then Texas beating Texas A&M, and now you got Steve Sarkisian politicking for Texas to be in the college football playoff. And I'll just say this: shouldn't have lost to Florida. That's why you're not going to be in it, in my opinion, and why you should not be in it. And I tell this to Alabama fans. They look at it and they say, well, the whole Notre Dame thing, they were behind them. And I'm just like, look, the Florida State loss has to at some point play a factor in how people view your resume. I know Alabama's better than they were then. That was a fluke, and 9 out of 10 times they will beat Florida State this year, without a doubt. But it didn't that day. So we'll just say that. But yeah, with Texas beating A&M, I will say this. I think Arch going into next year, we kind of had all the hype around him going into this year. And look, he had to develop. He had to get better. He had to get some snaps under. His name alone is why all the hype was there for him to be a Heisman Trophy winner and all that stuff, which was really unrealistic expectations for him coming into this season. But anyways, looking at that, with what Texas did against A&M, again, great win for them. They got the run game going. They did a lot of stuff around Arch, and finally A&M just caught up with them. But for A&M, honestly, them having a loss may not be bad for them. Just a simple fact, because now they can kind of rest up, get ready for the playoff. I mean, they're in the playoff. That loss wasn't going to hurt them. And then, we get to Saturday, some of the normal things. We see some of the games with South Carolina getting beat by Clemson, Louisville just blowing out Kentucky, and just, all those other games. And then Oklahoma figuring out a way to beat LSU. LSU had a lead in that game, and then late, the big pass from Mateer to get the win there against LSU. And then Florida beating Florida State. Again, I don't know how many people were really watching. Both teams are bad, but Florida getting the win there. The Iron Bowl. Auburn started out slow in that game, down 17-0. They get it figured out. Alabama did have some success running the ball. They got it. They did a good job getting after Ty Simpson. But for Auburn, a lot of the same things came back to get them, like discipline, some turnovers. They had 2 costs, especially with Cam Colvin. And then the penalties also cost Auburn in that one. And look, as much as Auburn pressured Alabama, Ty Simpson did make some big throws. But I am favoring Georgia going into the SEC championships. I mean, that was kind of like how everything went down in the SEC during rivalry weekend. And of course, you had the Ohio State game beating Michigan and 27-9. And I went into that game thinking, okay, Michigan just does not have enough offense. And then early on, they're up 6-0. They got an interception off Julian Sand. But you can't beat Ohio State just kicking field goals. You got to score touchdowns. They did do that early on when they maybe had a chance to take some big time momentum. And then Ohio State just proved to be the better team. So there. I wasn't going to do a rivalry weekend recap, but that is a very quick, abbreviated version of what happened over the weekend. So now we get into coach stuff and the Lane Kiffin stuff. Ole Miss came out last week, said the decision would be made the day after the Egg Bowl, which was on Friday. So you would expect a decision on Saturday. We get into Saturday night. We don't hear anything. Then you see there's going to be a team meeting at 9. That gets pushed back to 1. And then apparently just with all the stuff with Lane Kiffin going on, was about him wanting to coach the team through the playoff. And this is just it is part of the calendar for college football. We've always had this weird calendar, how everything works out. But with Lane Kiffin now going to LSU and not in coaching the playoff, and they're not going to let him do that. And I don't blame Ole Miss. I mean, gives him more opportunities to poach coaches and poach players. I mean, if you're Ole Miss, you just want him to get his way away from the program, go to LSU, don't even worry about it. And now Ole Miss has now got to go with Pete Golding, not just as an interim head coach, but as the new head coach. And now also an interesting thing with the Ole Miss situation, Charlie Weiss, the offense coordinator, he's not there. So you kind of who's going to be calling the plays for Ole Miss during this deal. But Lane Kiffin handled this poorly. And look, I'm just going to say this. And LSU fans, if you think you just landed a guy that's going to retire there and all that stuff, I wouldn't bet on it. This is who Lane Kiffin is. I mean, remember when he got the head coaching job at Tennessee 1 year ago and he went to USC. Of course, we know the whole thing fired at LAX, tarmac. Then he went to Alabama, offensive coordinator. Then Nick Saban fired him between the playoff game and the national championship game because he didn't feel like he was focused on what they need to be doing. He was worried about the Florida Atlantic stuff. Then he goes there. He does well, 2 10-win seasons in 3 years. He gets the Ole Miss job, 4 10-win seasons there where he's 55-19 overall, 32-6 the last 2 years. Ole Miss has had more sustained success as a football program with Lane Kiffin than they ever had. But he leaves, and it's just who he is. He's not going to stay in one place. If LSU thinks that there's never going to be rumors or speculation that he could be leaving, you're wrong. It's going to happen. It may not happen next year. Look, I'll say this. I think LSU is going to be very successful with Lane Kiffin as their head coach. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind the quarterback play is going to be better, offense is going to be better, and he will put a good staff. He'll bring in good players, all that stuff. He will do that. But let's just play a little devil's advocate. Let's throw some scenarios. What if Texas comes open and they come calling? What if maybe Alabama comes open, they come calling? Or maybe even the NFL. I mean, that could always be a possibility. So there's always going to be that flirtation, I think, with Lane Kiffin in leaving where he's at. I mean, just 3 years ago, he was very close to being Auburn head coach. I mean, a lot of people don't talk about that as much, but he was very close. And I've talked to some people from Mississippi, the state, and a lot of people thought he was going to Auburn. And last minute, I think it was more of a family deal where he stayed at Ole Miss. So he didn't go to Auburn. Then Auburn went with Hugh Freeze. But so I think Lane eventually will flirt with other teams. That's just who he is. He's always chasing, I guess, something that's better. And you know the old saying, grass is not always greener on the other side. So now LSU has their coach. Ole Miss has Pete Golding. We'll see how that works out. The playoff, and then next year, will Ole Miss be able to sustain the success that Lane Kiffin had there? I don't think they will. I think maybe in a year or two, Ole Miss is going to be looking for another coach because I don't think Pete Golding's the guy. I just don't see head coach when I see him. Now, Auburn hiring Alex Golesh, I like this hire. Of course, for the longest, and people watching on video can see I'm wearing a Troy hat. That's where I go to school. And I feel like I can wear Troy on here. I'm not going to have the internet keyboard warriors coming after me saying I'm biased. But anyways, I was thinking and hoping that, Jon Sumrall would be the next Auburn coach, but it didn't work out that way. You've seen reports or speculation online. That's because Auburn wanted him to retain DJ Durkin. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. I don't know if we'll ever officially know for sure if that is really what happened there with Auburn trying to get Jon Sumrall, but it just didn't happen. The Florida job opened up, and that's where he went. That is where he is now going to be the head football coach. But Alex Golesh has done a great job at South Florida. He did a great job as offensive coordinator at Tennessee. Remember Hendon Hooker, Joe Mixon. I mean, they had one of the best offenses in college football, throwing the ball down the field, but also could run the ball as well. Very fun offensive game. And he goes to South Florida, where they were a struggling program. The 3 years prior of him becoming the head coach of South Florida, they went 1-8, 2-10, 1-11, 4-29 overall. This was one of the worst programs in the country. Then his 3 years there, he goes 7-6, 7-6, then 9-3 this past year. So, really good record there, 23-15. An up-and-coming head coach and someone that has shown that he can build a program. Now, I have said this. I said this in my column for the Auburn Wire that retaining some people is going to be important. I think if you do retain DJ Durkin as your defense coordinator, that is going to lead to players that we're going to leave to stay. And then offensively, you need to really work on keeping Deuce Knight, Jeremiah Cobb, and Cam Coleman on this roster. And that's got to be key. Now, you see a lot of this being thrown around. Auburn needs to retain the roster. I don't think they need to retain the whole roster because we've seen that this team just does not do well with winning football. And he talked about that in his press conference on winning football, winning in the fourth quarter, what that takes. But that's something Auburn has struggled with. Look, all year, 5-7, but the 7 losses, 10 points or less. The 10-point game was against Georgia. The other ones were one score. So they were right there in all the games. As Hugh Freeze was saying, they're close, they're close, they're close. Well, they needed a coach to put them over the top. That was not Hugh Freeze. So, and look, it didn't seem like it was DJ Durkin either. You got to like what DJ Durkin has done for the program, especially as a defensive coordinator. Auburn had a really good defense. They played good defense against Alabama on Saturday night, but they need somebody, the head coach, put them over the top. But now if you can keep DJ Durkin as your defense coordinator, that will be a big thing. And then for him, they average over 500 yards total offense. They were second in college football this year, fourth in points, 43 points per game. Their quarterback, Byron Brown, threw for over 3,000, ran for 1,000, 28 passing touchdowns, 14 on the ground. And you just got to think, man, if you get Deuce Knight in this system, it should be really good. Jon Sumrall to Florida. Florida got a really good one, I think, too, here. 42-11 as a head coach, 2 Sun Belt titles at Troy, played for the American Athletic Conference title last year with Tulane, doing that again this Friday night with them. So Sumrall knows how to get teams to championship games. Now, I'm a Florida fan. I'm putting the brakes on thinking you're going to be in the SEC championship game next year. But still, this is a guy that wins. And this is a great hire. Like I said, it would have been great for Auburn, but it's going to be great for them. Now, he said in his press conference on Monday that he hasn't really got to play the offense he wanted to in his 2 stops. Especially at Troy, it was defensive-oriented team, and the offense adjusted enough to win, and they did. They won 2 Sun Belt championships. But we'll see what the offense is going to look like. What does he do, offensive coordinator? Ryan Silverfield from going to Arkansas. He's coming over from Memphis. He was 50-25 there, replaced Mike Norvell. And he did a good job at Memphis, and we'll see what he does at Arkansas. You know, the thing with the SEC, you have 16 teams, and they all want to win. They all want to be in the college football playoff, but I've always said that somebody's got to be bad. Unfortunately, that's the case. And talking about that, I look at Mark Stoops at Kentucky getting fired, 82-80, 13 seasons there. He did a great job at Kentucky, and he did things Kentucky hadn't been done. 2 10-win season, but they were 9-15 in the last 2 seasons. The offense had just been bad, especially since Will Levis, and that didn't live up to expectations either. When Will Levis was the quarterback there at Kentucky, it feels like it was time for Mark Stoops to maybe go his separate way from him and the school and do something different. And they are hiring Will Stein. He was the OC at Oregon. Actually played at Louisville, but now they're going more with the offensive side of the ball and see if they can get that better. I mean, they were good defensively at times. They weren't this year, other than when they played Auburn. But going offense, and it just seemed like it was time. It was time for a change there at Kentucky, and we shall see how that tends to go for them. And before I play my conversation with Jay Stevens, we recorded earlier on Monday evening, recording this late on Monday night, this part of the podcast. Anyways, I wanted to look at the college football playoff rankings coming up. Of course, we're recording this. This is coming out on Tuesday. There'll be another podcast later on in the week previewing the SEC championship game. But you've got, of course, Ohio State, Indiana, Nation State. I mentioned, where will A&M drop? How far do you drop them? They lost a tight game to Texas, a 9-win Texas team. I think you got to put Georgia over them and Texas Tech, but do you drop them below Oregon, Ole Miss, teams like that? I think you can't go any further than that. I think we will see A&M at 5. That's my 5 or 6 is my projection where we will see Texas A&M when the new rankings do come out. Alabama, do they go up? Do they go over Notre Dame? That's going to be kind of another interesting thing. Really, they have a problem now with the ACC because since SMU got beat by Cal on Saturday night, 7-5, Duke, they are in the ACC championship game. They'll play Virginia. You're hoping Virginia wins, and then they would be in the rankings. Virginia ranks 18 last week, and if they win ACC, but if Duke wins, and then let's just say Tulane and James Madison win on Friday night in their conference championship games, we could see a scenario where the ACC champion does not get to the college football playoff, but you could still get an ACC team in there. They put Miami in there, who Miami last week, and I'm going to assume this week will be the same. They will be the highest ranked ACC team. Right now they're at 12 going this last week. We'll see where they go on Tuesday night. So that's a big issue they have going there. And then, of course, this week going into games, Ohio State, Indiana, if that's a really good game, I think those teams should stay 1-2. Now, if Indiana wins a close game, they'll swap spots. Either way, you're going to see this week Georgia jump up to 3, Texas Tech to 4. I believe with that. Now, if Georgia takes care of business against Alabama, and even if they do it convincingly, they make a jump up to 2. And then you would look at, okay, does Alabama deserve to get into playoff? I think if Alabama, even you lose a close game to Georgia, I think you should still be in, because then you could say, well, they split against Georgia. But, Georgia's arguing was they beat everybody they played because they got that win back against Alabama. So a lot of interesting stuff going on. You got the Big 12 championship game between Texas Tech and BYU, but Texas Tech dominated when they played before. So it's going to be interesting how this looks going into this weekend, because obviously on Sunday will be the final rankings where we will find out who's going in to the playoff. All right, so we're going to jump into it now with Jay Stevens from Locked On Buckeyes. We will be talking about a bunch of different things with him, a lot of Ohio State stuff with him, beating Michigan, going into the matchup with Indiana. But we'll kind of talk about the scenarios and stuff going on with the rankings and also his thoughts on the SEC coaching carousel. Always interesting to get that opinion from kind of like outside the SEC. And Jay's always fun to have him on the show. So we are going to jump into that, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. All right, buddy, I'm going to take a break I'm going to take a break. We're going to get Jay's thoughts on this, but all the SEC coaching stuff going on over the weekend. That's right. If you're watching on YouTube, you see him on the screen. You're about to hear his voice. If you're listening to audio, that is Jay Stevens, my good friend up north in Big Ten country. You can check him out on Locked On Buckeyes every single day, and sports content specialist over at the Kokomo Post. And Jay, appreciate you coming on. Talk Ohio State and whatever stuff we kind of run into here.
Phillip, this is probably the first time we've done a show since Ohio State beat Michigan. So if I feel like I'm on cloud nine right now, it's okay. It's okay.
You know what? It is because the first time we connected was there. I believe was during 2020 during the COVID year. I think you reached out to me, and my memory can be good and bad sometimes. So we'll just see if I'm right. I think I talked to you. It was when Gus got fired at Auburn, and it was the 2020 SEC championship game coming up, because we talked. I'm telling you, it's bad, man. I can remember some stuff. We talked about the Florida player throwing the shoe against the LSU. That was way back. So you're right, because of course Ohio State has beat Michigan since 2019. They didn't play the game in 2020. So yeah, that's right. I hadn't even thought about that till you bring it up, that this is the first time I get to ask you about Ohio State beating Michigan.
Not only that, this is the first time since I've been hosting Locked On Buckeyes that Ohio State beat them too. I took over that show in 2020, and I felt some emotions when I saw that the game was going to be canceled that year, because it just definitely seemed like a certain team in a certain state up north was ditching the Buckeyes because they knew what was about to happen in that game. I don't know if that's actually factual, but that's how I feel. Anyways, Ohio State went to Ann Arbor and, my gosh, beat them down, man. Beat them down. So I am a little bit on cloud nine. I'm not going to gloat like I want to, but I'll do some things to rub it in their faces, because that program does some shady stuff every now and then.
Oh, yeah. Stealing, watching other teams and all that other stuff. Connor Stallions. That's all I need to say. But yeah, they did beat them 27-9, and I was intrigued with this game kind of because I felt like this Michigan team is more talented than the one that beat Ohio State last year. That went into, Ohio State and won. But before we even just look at the game or any of the stuff that happened in this one, for Ohio State, obviously the rivalry is important. And we saw that last year. I mean, because I think we talked about it. I talked about other people on the show that going to the playoff, a lot of people thought coming off of that, losing to Michigan once again, you got Tennessee coming in who had played well last year. That, man, is Ryan Day going to get fired if he gets beat in the first round? I mean, he hasn't been to beat Michigan. Now you lose, and then they go and win the national championship, despite losing to Michigan. But it's still important for Ryan Day and this program, just kind of getting that chip off their shoulder, just beating Michigan, ending the streak. How important was it for the program to accomplish that on Saturday?
It's so important. It was so important for Ryan Day to, one, focus on this game specifically, while also prioritizing the long grind of a season. And you could tell from game one until the game this past weekend, Ryan Day's approach was always geared towards this not being the end-all be-all, but this is the biggest of the regular season. And you have to prioritize this game to make sure you have a shot to play this upcoming weekend, the Big Ten championship game. And it's weird in the era that we live in college football, because really rivalry games don't really mean anything, because you can lose that game and go on to win the national championship. You can win that game and miss a bowl game. So, people don't really care about rivalry games in some aspects around the country. The Iron Bowl still matters. I think Ohio State-Michigan matters possibly more than any other rivalry in the country. I could be a little biased. I might be. But it does matter. And Ryan Day did not want to go into another year and lose to Michigan and then miss out on the shot to go to the Big Ten title. Where winning the conference championship still matters to Ryan Day. Where some people are like, no, you can lose to your rival. You can have a couple losses. You don't have to win your Big Ten, win your conference championship. You can still go to the playoff and win a national championship. Ryan Day knows that at Ohio State specifically, you don't lose 5 times in a row to Michigan. You just don't do it. It hadn't been done since, I think, 1920, the mid-1920s. Just to let you know how long it's been since Ohio State has lost 5 in a row. I think this is only the second time in school history, well, second in the modern era, in the AP poll era, that they've lost 4 in a row. And so he doesn't want to have that on his resume. While he is the coach that has the highest winning percentage in the country in college football history, you don't want to have it internally in your own program that you can't beat the rival, the one team you play every single year. It goes back and forth in both locations. You don't want to have that. And Ryan Day prioritized the long grind of a season, beating Michigan, getting the monkey off his back, while also trying to win more hardware this weekend. And I got to say, hats off to Ryan Day, because I was a guy on Locked on Buckeyes last year that was very critical of Ryan Day, of the way he was leading the program, the way that he was going into the game and coaching scared and coaching not to lose instead of trying to do everything you can to win the game. You saw this past weekend, even though there were some communication errors and the power on the sidelines was out at one time on Ohio State sideline, Ryan Day found a way. And that's been his motto all year. Just win. You don't have to put up style points. I mean, hats off to Indiana and Kurt Signetti that putting up 50 points on multiple teams this year. Ryan Day doesn't care about that. I think Kurt Signetti knows he needs to do that just to keep his name up there and to keep Indiana at the top of the polls. Ryan Day's like, if we win, everything else will take care of itself, which I think going into this weekend, just to get ahead of maybe the conversation a little bit, I don't think Ryan Day is going to put up 40 on Indiana or put up 50 on Indiana. They can, 100% they can. I don't think he cares about that. He cares about winning, and I think that shows the evolution of Ryan Day as he continues to adapt to this new world of college football.
And look, I don't know how your audience and Ohio State fans will feel about my comparison I'm about to give. This team reminds me of the early Nick Saban teams at Alabama. They could probably score 40, 50 on you, but they would beat teams like 24-3 or 24-6, or kind of like they did 27-9 against Michigan. But it felt much worse because they just beat you up. It was just a physicality that's there, and you see it with this Ohio State team with their defense and what they are up front on the offensive line. That's kind of how the team feels like. I'm like, yeah, they could score 40, 50 points if they wanted to, but they much rather just kind of play this, this style of game. And when Julian Saint has to beat you, he can make the throws. But they're an efficient team that just kind of all the parts just work together very, very well.
They do. They 100% do. Even in part of the season, now this was a weaker part of the schedule, but Jeremiah Smith plays about a half against UCLA, then misses the game after that. Carnell Tate misses 3 games in a row. And then all of a sudden you realize Ohio State doesn't lean on their other receivers. They lean on their own tight ends to try to get the job done. And what you found in that game against Michigan was them using 3 and 4 tight ends in the mid part of the third, all the way through the rest of the game, to allow Ohio State to control the time of possession and can keep the ball. But also in the fourth quarter, you allowed your stars that have been banged up to get some rest. One of the best parts of this game that wasn't really a drive that led to a touchdown, Ohio State went on a 20-play drive, 81 yards, 11 minutes and 50-some-odd seconds. Almost 12 minutes went off the clock. The drive started at about the 5-minute mark in the third quarter. It ended at about the 8-minute mark in the fourth quarter. Ohio State scored a field goal. But in that drive, you saw Ohio State do some things you never thought you would see from Ohio State in this game. You won the line of scrimmage. You were just scratching and clawing and moving your way down your field. You didn't care if you were going to make some explosive plays or explosive runs. It was simply ball control. Move the ball, keep it moving, more of an NFL-style offense. And you're not going to see many 20-play drives in the NFL, but in this game, with the physicality of both teams, you saw that. And that goes to show the growth of Ryan Day. Also to the fact that I think Ryan Day is currently – he knows how to work with college kids while trying to professionalize and use an NFL mindset to help them be better. Not just
Mhm.
develop them for the future of the NFL, but also teaching them right now, you don't have to blow everybody out. Just
Mhm.
win. And in the process, if you blow them out, you blow them out. And I
Mhm.
like what Ryan Day is doing. It's been frustrating at times, Phillip. My wife and I went to the Ohio State Purdue game. We live about an hour away from Purdue, so we made the trip over there. The game was kind of boring. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, it was kind of boring to watch Ohio State play football because it's not college. It's college, not the NFL. If it was the NFL and the Colts were running the offense, cool. I wouldn't have a problem. Ohio State's moving so slow, very methodic. They're just 5 yards here, 7 plays there, 3 yards there. They're just moving the ball down the field. Carnell Tate didn't go. Jeremiah Smith played. You had guys dropping balls that they normally wouldn't drop. But what you find is nobody could stop them. You couldn't stop them at all. That's all Ryan Day cares about.
Mhm.
Efficient football is winning football. And that's been Ryan Day's motto all year. And I think it's a big reason why they're going to beat Indiana on Saturday.
Looking at the game against Michigan, early on, Michigan's up 6-0, but I'm watching the game. I'm looking at it like this. I'm like, you've got opportunities here, Michigan, but you're not scoring touchdowns, and field goals are not going to beat Ohio State. Teams like that, you've got to score touchdowns. They go up 3-0, and then they get the interception on Julian Sand, and then Michigan goes up 6-0. Any point at that part of the game that had you a little bit concerned just because of what has happened the last couple times since 2019 in this matchup?
I would say maybe a little, but that was so small because Michigan was in the game with a banged up backup running back, and I think at that time he was on the sidelines. So you're going in there with a third string running back and a true freshman quarterback against this defense. Not really, because Ohio State's weathered storms all year. Let's not forget, they went to Husky Stadium and beat Washington. They ended up the scores 24-6. Even though Washington had a lead early in the game, it didn't feel like Washington was in control of that game. And while Michigan had a 6-0 lead in this game this past weekend, nobody would say that Michigan was in control. Like, Michigan felt like they were about to go on a run or anything like that. It was simply they capitalized on a bad decision by Julian Sand. It was a bad throw. It was one of the worst throws he's made all year. He threw an interception at Purdue that he wants to take back, and that one was just as bad. He's a first-year starter. So, even though it's game number 12, it's the first time in this rivalry in that environment. It may happen, but the defense all year has shown they have answers for any quarterback, any offense they're going against. And it happened once again. Bryce Underwood, to me, was underutilized in that game. There was absolutely no reason why he was not utilizing his legs more to get guys like Andrew Marsh and Donovan McCauley the ball in open space. Now, I know Ohio State has NFL defensive backs, and so it's a little bit difficult for a guy who's a true freshman to get the ball to your playmakers in space when your playmakers are not in space and they're not open in space. They're in space, but they are locked up because Ohio State has NFL defensive backs. But still, Bryce Underwood is very athletic. I don't know why they didn't just let him play. I don't want to say freestyle football because that would have been actually even worse, honestly. But let him throw the ball around a little bit. Design plays and protections to allow him to utilize his arm. And they didn't do that. And I don't believe that was because your running backs are hurt. I think it was because they didn't trust him. And that's a Sharon Moore thing. You got this guy in here. They paid some stupid amount of money to get him to go to Michigan. And then in the biggest game of the year, you don't let him play quarterback? Yeah, credit to Ohio State's defense. But also, that's a disservice that Sharon Moore and the offensive staff did for that young man because they didn't let him play his game.
Yeah. And, then you had the Jeremiah Smith touchdown, a little controversy along with that. And then, Carnell Tate with the big one late. And, Julian's saying, I saw it interception, but you look at the numbers, 1926, 233, 3 touchdowns. Like you said, efficient play for him. And whenever I watch, because, a guy here, Auburn guy, covers the team. Whenever I hear Bo Jackson, it just throws me off. But with Ohio State, 117 yards for him and 186 for the team overall. And a big part of that 20-play drive you mentioned, they ran the ball 16 times during that drive. So it was a championship level drive that took up 11 minutes. So any hopes for Michigan were dashed with that drive. I mean, I honestly, they were down 24-9. Did I believe they were going to score 2 touchdowns on Ohio State? You hadn't done it all day. I don't think it was about to start all of a sudden unless something fluky happened. But now they go into this game with Indiana. And for you personally, you're an Ohio State podcast host, Ohio State guy, but you live in the state of Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
How just like in awe, or maybe that's not the right word, just surprised. I mean, just seeing that a program in the state you live in that arguably the worst program in college football, when you look at some numbers, is now the number 2 team in the country, much better than the team we saw last year. This Indiana team is just completely 100% better than that team was. Now it has a chance to go up against the Buckeyes in a 1 versus 2 matchup. And for the Big Ten, it's got to kind of be in your part of the country, kind of got to be a wild to a certain extent.
Extremely wild. I'll add one more little note to this. My mom is an Indiana University graduate, so that's something else. I haven't talked to her about this game. I know who she's going to root for. She knows who I'm rooting for. So, and there's no love lost. Like, we just know, like, it's a part of the family thing. But it's weird, man. I know guys. I know a lot of people that went to IU, as we call it. And actually, funny, I got a message today from a kid that lives here locally. I cover high school football. Saw him all the time on Friday nights. He messaged me and said, "May the best team win. It's going to be a heck of a game." And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're correct. It is going to be a heck of a game. But, yeah, it's weird, man. It's weird seeing of the big 3 schools in Indiana, Notre Dame, and Purdue. Indiana's easily the 3rd worst football program in the state in the history of college football. Notre Dame. Purdue has been to Rose Bowls. Purdue has been even they Drew Brees and Mike Allstott. They put guys in the NFL. Indiana's not that. And the fact that Curt Cignetti has come in and quickly shifted the culture and has people believing that they can go and play Ohio State and win this weekend. Now, some of it is a little biased because, not gonna lie to you, some Indiana fans do not live in reality. They live in, it's the Hoosiers. They can beat everybody. Let's not get it twisted. Curt Cignetti went to the portal and got older players. But some of those older players they got last year, I don't believe they're physically ready for this level of football. I believe Indiana can beat some really good teams. They went to Austin and beat Oregon. They can beat some really good teams.
Mm-hmm.
There's a level of physicality that they play with that might not match Ohio State's level of physicality. They also have a coach that's very arrogant. And Curt Cignetti is on record. He won't say it. I'll say it about him. He is a very arrogant coach. Mm-hmm. These players don't seem like they pick up that attribute of his, which I think is great. But I remember seeing a video recently, as odd as this is, of them being there. Last year, Curt Cignetti went to the Big Ten championship game and just watched it. He wore a suit, watched it. He was on the Big Ten Network roundtable show after the game. He is sitting there, and he was like, I wanted to come here because we're going to be here next year. And it wasn't so much what he said was arrogant. He doesn't have normal TV etiquette. He's sitting back in his chair, not really sitting up. I'm like, dude, just like you're 62 years old. Like, at least act a little bit more put together. But he's not put together. That's who he is. It's weird, man. It is weird. The fact that he can call it a year earlier while still going to the portal to get these guys in is phenomenal. When I just arrived, Omar Cooper Jr., really good receivers. Mendoza is a guy that deserves to be in the Heisman conversation. Their defense, Aiden Fisher, Kamara up front, Pons in the back. They got a lot of dudes over there. It's going to be a battle. It's going to be a battle. But, yes, I know I said a lot to get back to the point. It is going to be weird. I have an opportunity to go. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make the game, but it's going to be fun. I'm going to see a lot of people on Instagram and Facebook that are wearing IU colors, the IU on their hat and on their shirt, that'll be there at the game. And they knew who I'm rooting for. If I see them there, I'm not going to try to, rub it in their faces. But this Ohio State team's a different animal. Indiana is good. Ohio State's defense is doing things that are historic. I believe I saw a stat. that Ohio State's allowed the fewest points through 12 games, which is the most fewest points through 12 games going back to Florida in 1975. So, like, everything they're doing right now is so historic and so rare that it's going to take a team that can do some things out of this world to beat them. Indiana is a team that does crazy things. I don't see them being ready for Ohio State this weekend. I truly don't.
You know, and when I look at Fernando Mendoza, look, Auburn played Cal last year.
Yeah.
And I saw this quarterback. And then going into this year, I saw so many people saying, this is a potential first-round draft pick. I'm like, I don't see it. He's a statue back there. He can move a little bit, but, I mean, he's not fleet of foot by any stretch of the imagination. But now he's a guy this year that I've seen people talk about this game that this could decide the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah.
And both these two teams are really good defensively. And Indiana's a really good offense when you look at the stats. Number 5 in passing the Big Ten, number 1 running team in the Big Ten. I feel like, and I love your thoughts. It's going to come down to the quarterbacks, but not in the way I think people are hoping. Like this is not going to be a high-scoring game. You've got a better chance of seeing that in the SEC championship between Georgia and Alabama.
Yeah, you do.
I'll just be honest with you. You got a better chance of seeing that. But I think what it's going to do, though, I think the game probably is going to come down to 2 or 3 throws by these two quarterbacks, and it's going to be who makes the more of the big throws. I think Saying has proven this year when he has to, he can do it. We've obviously seen Mendoza because when you look at the results of the season, Indiana has been more tested than Ohio State late in games, you know. So that's something we've seen. Am I far off on that, or what do you think about that?
I think it's going to come down to the quarterback play, but I wouldn't put all of it saying the better quarterback is going to win. I still think it's going to be down to the defenses. One thing Saying does very, very well is not force the ball down the field. He does a great job, especially late, getting the ball to his running back in Bo Jackson in the flat or to his check down in Max Clare or Will Kazmarek at the 2 tight end spots. I think that ability for him, and I know Mendoza is going to have to do the same thing because he's going to see a defense and see pictures pre-snap versus post-snap that he's never seen this year. And so one thing these quarterbacks are going to have to do is literally take what the defense gives them. If you see pre-snap, I can't throw the ball, don't throw the ball. If you see pre-snap, when you just make your decision to not throw the ball, you need to give it to your running back that doesn't normally get those carries. Give it to the running back. You're going to have to do take what the defense gives you, because if you don't, if you try to force things, well, Indiana's defense is very opportunistic, and I don't know if they have the best turnover margin in the country, but I'm sure it's probably top 10. I think Ohio State is one where they're not looking to really just get the turnovers; they're looking to stop you. Where I think Indiana, a big reason why they get 40, 50 points in certain games, their offense gets the ball in favorable field position numerous times, week after week after week. What happens when they get the ball and they start backed up on their own 20 or on their own 13 multiple times in a game? What happens? We've seen Ohio State be able to get back there and be able to make long drives and march down the field. Can Indiana do that? We're going to wait. We're going to find out.
You know, and looking at this and kind of transition and just looking at the playoff, how it's looking. I look at this matchup, especially if it comes down the way. I think a lot of people think it close game, low scoring, potentially. Whoever, makes the fewest mistakes. That's always in football, but this game, it feels like the fewest mistakes, that team is going to win. I think, now, unless Georgia just was to blow out Alabama in the SEC championship game, I feel like it would be, both these two teams deserve to still stay at 1-2. Now, if Indiana wins, obviously you got to put them at 1. But still, the way these two teams have played all year, they have shown to be the best two teams. And that's one thing I look at it with this whole thing, SEC versus Big Ten.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and SEC bias over here, I've never shied away from it. I mean, that's just me. I feel like from top to bottom, the SEC is better than the Big Ten this year, from just the top. But I'll say this. I think the top of the Big Ten has proven throughout the season, we'll see what happens in the playoffs, to be better. Ohio State, Indiana. Maybe you could throw Oregon in there a little bit. They've been a solid team too as well, versus what the SEC is, where they've just been knocking each other off. Where you've got the teams at the bottom of the SEC has proven this year they could upset the top teams. But I say all that though, but I believe we have a close game, like we've talked about here. I think you've got to keep Ohio State and Indiana at 1-2, unless that scenario happens where Georgia blows out Alabama. But I don't see that happening.
Well, think about this scenario. Let's say one of these two teams gets blown out. Say Ohio State gets blown out or Indiana gets blown out. I think it's more likely Indiana gets blown out than Ohio State getting blown out. But let's say, just for conversation's sake, one of these two teams gets blown out. It'd be easier to put Indiana at 4 or even 5 if they get blown out than it would be to put Ohio State at 4 or 5 if they got blown out.
Agree.
Brand power matters right now. And I think when it comes to this committee, in the old system, in the 14 playoff, 1 versus 2, if it's a close game, you're going to 4. You're going to 3. No one's really going to question that. In this system, where you know you're still going to be in the playoff, they might want to make a statement. And let's say it's a close game. Because I think we both think it's going to be a close game. Let's say it's a close game. Ohio State wins by 6 points. Indiana should fall, to me, no lower than 3. To me, if Georgia goes to 2, cool. You're the champion of the Southeastern Conference. We know how that is weighted and how the conference is with the teams. Like, I'm not going to – you put them at 2. If you don't put Indiana at 3, at worst they're at 4. If you put them at 5, that's a misplaced team in the bracket, and you're trying to make a statement. And I think that'd be wrong because you cannot – brand power matters, but when it comes to this playoff, you can't look at somebody's logo and put them where you think a logo is supposed to go. So let's look at what you see on the field and how the team is playing and allow your eyeballs and maybe some data points to help you put them where they belong. And so I think the brand power that Ohio State has drastically outweighs Indiana. This isn't basketball. This is still football. And so I hope the committee gets it right. I really do. If it's a close game, whoever the loser is, whoever it is, should be no lower than 3. To me, I would be okay with Georgia going to 2, 100%. I don't even know what the rankings are right now. Now, Phillip, I've been hosting a show covering Ohio State since 2020. I rarely talk about the rankings on a regular basis. I'll talk about the CFP rankings whenever they first come out. I will occasionally dabble in the AP and coaches polls as talking points randomly just to kind of fill some space. I don't talk about it. Ohio State fans don't care, especially when they're undefeated. Now they have 1 loss, 2 losses. I have to bring it up. I got to react to the polls. But most people, and myself, and maybe this is my own flaw, I don't care about the polls. I truly don't care. And it was worse when it was just like this when I was a fan. Now, in high school I did. In high school I was a nerd that had made up my own poll because I was like, well, I like the BCS, but it could be better, so I made my own poll up. I used to do it in school, take the newspaper around the school and get my notepad out and start to make my own poll, and I would have my own top 25. I am that nerd guy. Sorry. I'm not apologizing for it.
No, don't apologize. wave that nerd flag.
We're both nerds in our own way.
Man, I have a Superman Funko Pop back there. I mean, come on. I mean, I've got nerd written all over me.
I'm the guy. I don't know if my wife actually knew this when we met. Well, she knew because I eventually told her. But I collect rally towels. And so Ohio State recently had one that they put out this year. It's the towel. And my wife got it for me. It's right here. And so, like, these, like, sports towels, I collect them. I have another Ohio State one on my dresser over here. And, like, that's the kind of the nerd stuff. Like, I wasn't, like, a big trading card type of guy. I didn't really collect those. Rally towels. Call me a nerd for doing that. I'll gladly wear that badge.
Yeah. So, we just talking about the playoffs. I think that you talking about the committee. The ACC situation is bad because I was talking with some people at church on Sunday after our Sunday school connection class. I'm like, if Duke wins, just say this. There's a scenario where the ACC champion is not in the playoff because I got to think James Madison and Tulane take care of business because, people forget it's not the Power 4 plus 1.
Correct.
It is the top 5 conference champions according to the rankings. Now, would they take Duke and jump them over one of those two teams? I don't know. But then that opens the door. But then you would have an ACC team in potentially, because then they would probably just put Miami in just to have an ACC team in there. And then that brings up the Notre Dame argument and all kinds of stuff. So there's a part of me that hopes Saturday night that Duke wins, just to throw everything into chaos with how these rankings are going to look. And could we have a potential situation where the ACC champion does not get in, but Miami gets in? That,
the whole top 5 conference champions automatically get in. I think that was something that would have been a great idea if the Pac-12 was still a conference. It's even dumber that they're not. And when they are a respected conference, once again, they're going to be at the group of 5 level. That I don't believe they're going to be a power conference. And that's going to be a bad mark of the sport. If you continue this trend of having the top 5 conference champions automatically get in, because you're just inviting a little guy to the dance that doesn't even deserve to be there, you're going to get a scenario where you're going to get some guys that could get hurt. Now, I know that you say they're still playing football. Tulane's playing football. Trust me. You know this, Phillip. The SEC and Big Ten play a different level of football than the American, than the MAC, than the Sun Belt. It's not a knock on the other schools. There are literal levels, like even the ACC and the Big Ten and SEC, there's different levels of football that those conferences play. And so if you want to talk about player safety, this could be a player safety matter. Now, I'm not a big player safety guy when you're playing football, because football is a violent game. It's a very fast game. These are literal or figurative, like car crashes every single play. And so I know there's a level of safety that goes out the window when you step into a football field. And I actually love that about football. Mm-hmm. But at some point, you can't even say, like, it would be very, very dumb to me to have 2 conference champions on the group of 5 level, because an ACC team the conference is so down. You have a 7-5 team in your conference championship game because of your system. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And the issue is also, this also goes to show why 12 isn't a good number. I know they will hate me saying that, but I don't care. 12 is a bad number to try to find a true national champion. If you say 12, give me 12 teams from a power conference level. And if one of those other teams from a group of 5 conference is able to be inside the top 12, then they have earned their right to be in the big dance. They haven't earned their right. I believe the first or second poll of the season from the CFP didn't even have a group of 5 conference team in the top 25. That's a problem. That's not a problem. That's a reality of why that's where they belong. But 2, the problem is the system demands that they make it to the playoff. I can't stand it. I can't at all. Give me the top 12 teams. I don't even think conference champions should automatically be in. I know that's probably not a popular opinion. I don't care. If you're a top 12 team in the country, you're probably going to win your conference. And if you didn't, okay. Still, you've proven your spot. Go out there and play the game.
And I'll wrap up this discussion on this. This is why, if you're going to do the 12-team playoff and you want to avoid the Duke situation, you don't have conference championship games. You award your conference champion the best record. You figure out your tiebreakers if there is one with that, and you go with that, because then you just award Virginia the ACC championship, and then they are your champion. They get in the story. But that I think the SEC is always going to be the one that's going to probably hold off on getting rid of the conference championship games, because the SEC championship has always just been a big money money maker for them. So the other conferences, I just don't see how it really comes in with revenue. But anyways, that's a completely different podcast. We've gone over 30 minutes. So I wanted real quickly, because you're a big college football fan as I am. Obviously, you've been seeing the SEC head coach carousel. I mean, Lane Kiffin is the headliner, but you got Jon Sumrall now at Florida. Golesh now at Auburn. You got the Memphis coach at Arkansas. Mark Stoops gets fired. Golding is now the head coach at Ole Miss. A whole bunch of stuff going on down here in the SEC. Just what has been, your overall take from Big Ten country on what's been going on with the SEC coaches?
The carousel of coaches in the SEC continues. This is not a Nick Saban problem. I believe this has been going on for a very long time because people are trying to find a way to beat Nick Saban and to beat them, but you couldn't do it. So your patience got thinner. You thought, well, we give a guy a contract. If he doesn't live up to the contract, we can let him go. We can find a reason to fire him and to go out there and get somebody else. So the thought is always the grass is always greener on the other side. But I think what we're finding is it's not that there aren't a lack of quality candidates. I think the hiring process is horrible. I think what ADs and presidents are doing is trying to rush and find the guy instead of doing what Penn State did. Like Penn State, if reports are true, could find a way to get Kalani Sitake away from BYU to be the new head coach at Penn State. If that is true, Penn State waited over half a season.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't rush. The players even made some public statements about wanting Terry Smith, the interim head coach, to be their coach. Penn State waited and waited and waited. The next thing you know, if this happens, they could easily have the best hire of the offseason, of the cycle, because they waited and they took their time. One thing that Ryan Day did, let's go back to Ryan Day real quick. This past offseason, to replace Jim Knowles, Ryan Day didn't go to his own, didn't listen to everybody else. He waited. He was patient. He did his own due diligence. He followed his own timetable, and he found Matt Patricia, a guy that some people said was a bad hire. You went back to some of his legal issues in the late 90s that people didn't even talk about, but you wanted to find a reason to slander a man who's just got a couple $1 million to coach a football team. The next thing you know, Matt Patricia's a guy that is one of the better assistant coaches in the country because Ryan Day waited and took his time. If you look at all these schools right now, and we know Lane is the headliner, and he could have handled this so much better. He could have been he made a comment at a presser that told me he was leaving. That was about 2 weeks ago, and he sounded so immature. And it was talking about the noise and how the players are handling the noise. And to me, it's like handling the noise. You're ditching your team that's about to go to the playoff. You're part of the problem. Why do you think the grass is greener at LSU when it's very, very clear it's not? That's the only reason.
The money.
That's absolutely the only reason. To me, he could have been at Ole Miss what Joe Paterno was at Penn State. Joe Pa only won one national championship, maybe two. And I think if Lane Kiffin stayed there, now it would take a long time because I don't think he's going to. I don't think if he was at Ole Miss, they were going to beat Ohio State. I don't think they're going to beat some of these other big-time schools. They will struggle to beat Oregon. So, I'm not saying it's going to be a perfect formula. If you win one national championship at that school, you're a legend, an absolute legend. You go to LSU and you win a national championship, you're not a legend. You're not even promised to win one. I think Lane Kiffin made a bad decision because money is a great way to pull somebody in. I don't think his philosophy is going to work at LSU. I don't. I think the pressure is too high. I think that his ability to recruit high school kids will have to go to a level that I don't think he's ever been at. You're not going to use the portal in the same way you did at Ole Miss to get players in. And also, I don't know if you're going to get 20 players to leave Ole Miss to go to LSU. So all the things that are going to could make him succeed early on, he might not. And you're not promised to beat Alabama next year. You're not promised to go to the SEC title game. You're not promised to go to the playoff. We're at Ole Miss. You can have one loss or two losses, and you would probably go to the playoff next year, even if you don't win the SEC title, because of the school you're at and what it means to the sport. To me, I know Kentucky's another team. I don't know if you mentioned them earlier, that they fired their coach, and they'll probably have another coach hired within the next 24 to 48 hours. I hope that these schools learn their lesson to not lean into the issues with the calendar in college football, but to find a way to just be patient. Ryan Day lost a running back in spring practice a couple years ago. A running back coach, excuse me. He went to Michigan. He didn't rush to go find another running back coach. He took his time. He waited. He found a guy that was an up-and-comer, but one that people didn't really talk about in Coach Laughlin. And the next thing, Carlos Laughlin. Next thing you know, Bo Jackson, you talked about him earlier. Bo Jackson is probably one of the better true freshman running backs in the country. I wouldn't be shocked if he ends the season as the top, having the most rushing yards and rushing touchdowns of all true freshman running backs in the country. That's a lot because of Coach Loughlin's ability to recruit and develop talent. One last thing, Phillip, because you got me on a rant, and it's still going. A lot of people have been making comments about, well, the SEC coaches and this coaching carousel is because, well, the calendar is broken. I think the calendar is messed up. But the calendar does not dictate how fast you move. The ADs, the presidents, and the chancellors can change the calendar. Don't blame the NCAA. Don't blame them at all. The people in the sport that run the sport are the athletic directors, the conference commissioners, and the presidents of these universities. They have the power to change things. And if they truly want things done, they could do what happened in the 80s, where a couple schools went to Congress and they filed a lawsuit over some TV deals and some TV contracts and the restrictions, and that stuff changed. And that stuff can happen now. If you truly want the portal to be controlled and move to a different time, if you want signing day to move to a different time, you know the people that have the power to change it, they're just not doing it. You're pointing fingers at the NCAA that want to and say, oh, they're the problem. I don't think the NCAA is the biggest problem in college sports. The ADs, the commissioners of the conferences, and the presidents are a massive problem because they're not taking control of the situation that they can't control. Phillip, I'm sorry. I had to get it off my chest.
Oh, no, I get 100%. And I'll just say this. I'll say this in the open, too, with Lane Kiffin. If LSU, you think you've got your guy and he's just going to be at LSU till he retires, that's probably not going to happen. If Texas opens or Alabama opens or if the NFL comes calling, he will be in this same spot again because 3 years ago, he almost became the Auburn head coach. He almost left Ole Miss. It was every single year his name was mentioned for another job. He is going to constantly flirt with other teams, and it's just who Lane Kiffin is. It's just kind of where he's at. So, well, in 3 to 4 years, his name will be mentioned for another job. And if the money's greater than what LSU can give him, he's probably going to leave. So that's just kind of who Lane Kiffin is. I thought he rebuilt his reputation at Ole Miss, but he kind of, told us, he showed us who he is. Once again, that's kind of like my feeling on Lane Kiffin. He's going to do great. I think they'll be a fun team to watch at LSU. Offensively, they'll be fun and they'll win some games. He'll probably be in the playoff, but eventually he will leave to go somewhere else. That's just who he's been. But Jay, you will never leave as one of our favorites here on the Phillip Jordan Podcast. Where can the listeners, viewers check out if they want to follow all your work?
Phillip, I've really enjoyed this like always. You can follow me on Twitter at jsteven07. I'm also on Threads and Blue Sky. I don't post on there as much as I do on Twitter, but I'm trying to get into the trend of posting on all three simultaneously. Yeah, there's some ways to make that happen. Check out Locked on Buckeyes every Monday through Friday and also live after Ohio State football games where we talk about Ohio State football. Brian Hartline being in the conversation to potentially be the next head coach at Kentucky is something we're going to be talking about this week, as well as the upcoming game against the Indiana Hoosiers. I will tell you this: I believe Ohio State will win the game. I don't have a score prediction for that game yet, but I don't have a reason to doubt Ohio State's ability in this game to beat the number 2 team in the country and to win their first Big Ten title since 2020.
All right, everybody go check it out. Locked on Buckeyes. Hey, and I'm going to a little programming note for Jay's show this week. One of our favorites here on the podcast as well, Jacob Goings, host of Locked on Hoosiers. Him and Jay will be doing a crossover preview that game later in the week. So I suggest you go check that out wherever you get podcasts. And once again, Jay, appreciate your time, and I look forward when you do this again.
Thanks, Phillip. I enjoyed it.
All right. Once again, thanks to Jay Stevens. Now, at the end there, he mentioned the Kentucky thing. Of course, we talked about that in the open. Just we recorded that earlier before the news came out about Kentucky's new head coach. That's going to do it for the podcast today. I plan on doing another one later in the week, previewing the SEC championship game, getting into that. So it'll be Thursday or Friday. That one will come out. Check out the pod. Please subscribe. Share it out. Tell your friends. All right, let's do it. Good football content here on the show. Follow me on social media, P. Jordan Sports. Check out my written work over at the Auburn Wire. You can find the podcast. You see it down there on Apple, Spotify. Those are made too, but it's in other places too. YouTube as well, the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. And you can email me, sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. And I'll talk to you guys later on. Until next time. Bye-bye.